This module that we're going to be starting with this morning is related to building a dynamic, interactive, organizational web presence. The philosophy here and the approach here is that it is no longer possible for an organization to simply have a website and be sufficient. That people spend so much time online in so many different ways, with so many different devices, with so many different services, that it's important that an organization have a presence that can be detected in those activities and in those various searches, then funneled back to a central organizational site where the organization has control of the content and can guide the message just a little bit. So the organizational web presence then becomes sort of a foundation for everything else that we do. Here's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to look at what an organizational web presence is and why it's important. We're going to talk about the consumer decision journey, because the technologies that we're working with have created new variations of the way consumers go about looking for product and organization information. And so let's pick up a little bit of that and see how important that is to what we're trying to do. We're going to talk a little bit about the components of that organizational web presence, the various things and the various resources that are integrated within it. And then when we move later on to the hands-on portion of that, we're going to look at some of the resources that are available to you and your clients through the auspices of KSBDC to build some of those resources for their organizations. So what is an organizational web presence? These are some of the basic features. Extensive integrated collection of sources with a common set of objectives and goals to drive people to the central organized content. So what we're doing essentially is casting a net, and we're trying to capture people at different spots on the web where they look for content, they're doing searches, they're engaged in activities, they're talking to their friends online, they're looking at reviews of organizations and sites online, and wherever we find them, we would like to give them the opportunity to come back to our content and see what we're doing at the various places where we're involved. We would like to steer that toward our organizational objectives so we have some sense of what they're doing when they get there and how they got to us, and we want to measure that impact. So that the metrics that come out of that web experience are part of what we capture as well. What is it that an organization is trying to accomplish by building that established, more extensive web presence? The first is to try and control the message across the organization and across the web, to try and to create a situation in which users and customers get a unified sense of what it is that you do and what you're trying to accomplish. You're trying to engage visitors and users in ways that you haven't before. So now you're not just presenting content like you would in an informational website. You're talking back and forth with people. You're seeing what they're saying about your organization and your product, and you're seeing where they're saying it. And in some cases, you can even engage them in the marketing effort itself to encourage your customers and your users to become proponents for your organizations. You can see what people are saying about the organization. You can engage them in interaction in various ways, in various different formats, and with various different tools. You can track and, to some extent, and the importance here is to some extent, manage content in different parts of the web. So in a review service, you might not have the opportunity to get rid of a review that you don't like. In some cases, if you think it's unfair, you can appeal it and have it come down. But you do have the opportunity to respond. And that gives you puts you in a much better position to have a very publicly visible complaint that you've done something about, rather than a diatribe that's just left hanging there for everyone else to see. So you can't really control that content, but to some extent you can manage it. And to provide consumers with content about your organizations and about your products as they move through the consumer journey. So let's turn to that topic and talk about some of the ways in which information technologies have impacted the way consumers look for products and services and solutions to their problems, and what impact that might have for you as you look to this organizational presence. Traditionally, we thought of this as a funnel. Almost any of you who have taken a Principles of Marketing course will have seen something like this, and you will have heard about a decision process in which people confront a situation and they have in mind we call it an evoked set, a series of brands that they consider. Okay, and you would like to be in that evoked set. And the process that they go through is one of gradually screening that number of brands until they finally make a choice. And the notion is that it's all rational, that it's all systematic, that they gather information from a relatively few number of sources as they go through, and they come out at the end with a product that they want. More recently, in studies by McKinsey and Google, a slightly different model has emerged. Now, this is from McKinsey. And they're working with a model based on their consumer studies, and I think this is something where about 20,000 consumer interviews that they've worked with over a variety of different types of products, in which there is an initial consideration set, but as consumers start to gather information and look over possibilities, that can actually grow or shrink. So it isn't one set of brands that they're looking at and they weed that out. The search process, the evaluation of alternatives creates more brands in the brand set that they consider. There's the moment of purchase, and then you work through the loyalty loop, either full, complete loyalty to the product or some form of systematic loyalty where you divide your purchases in a category between 2 or 3 different products you like, some model of loyalty, and that as you go through that, that triggers the process again when you find that you need more of a product that you've purchased, or you're out, or there's some new feature is come into play that you want to add to the benefits that you have in front of you. Now in this model, consumers actually add brands when they start searching. So the funnel model no longer applies. Okay? As people start to look, and you've probably had that happen. Have you had a web search, for example, where you had in mind a brand or a product, a television or a bag or something like that? You looked at it and then the review said, oh, this is pretty nice, I like this one, but I like this model a little bit better. And now all of a sudden you have another one to start to look for. Okay? If you've had that experience, so have other people. And typically what McKinsey found is that in these different product categories, people would add brands as they went through the process. So typically with automobiles, they would start with about 4 brands in mind, 4 different models in mind, and add another 2. Now you add 0.2 of a car to your price, I don't know, but that's the averages, and lets you know that at least that brand set is growing as you go through it. In addition to that, different types of information are used at different stages in that process. So what they've done here, this is the initial consideration set, active evaluation where other brands get added, and then finally at closure. And they've identified on the vertical axis the types of information that consumers look for and that they use at that particular stage. And then the column for each of those stages indicates the relative importance of that information. So at the initial consideration set, the dominant factor is information provided by the company. Ads, websites, areas where they've seen the placements or sponsorships where they've seen the brand information and they're ready to go. They rely on past experience, remember that loyalty loop, to indicate the types of products that might fall into their consideration set. And then consumer-driven marketing, word-of-mouth, online research, which is this type of thing we're talking about here, becomes more important. And then finally, the interaction at the store. But look what happens as you move across. At each stage, the information provided by consumers that they seek out themselves, that's available online, that's part of their information search, becomes increasingly more important. It is the dominant factor in the evaluation stage, and even in the closure stage, trails only direct contact with a store or a person in the direct contact with the organization. So it is a very important factor all the way throughout. But notice that people are using it a little bit differently, but it's active in all the stages of the search process. Google has built on this with a separate sort of approach to understanding online communication and how that fits into the decision process. And they are expanding essentially the 3-step model that we looked at, where you have a stimulus to get going. And this is at the first moment of truth for them, is the experience in the store, at the shelf, with the dealer, with the salesperson where you're making the contact. And the second moment of truth is the experience that you have. So they are looking at the stimulus, and then they have the initial purchase, and now we're looking at the feedback loyalty loop at the third stage that they're calling moments of truth. And in this study, and this was about 25,000 interviews, well, actually these weren't interviews. This was a set up a research mechanism based on a video game approach where you did information that talked about how you would do a search for different types of products. You reflect that information as you went through the game, and they tracked the decision process of consumers as they did that. And in doing so, they identified what they are calling the zero moment of truth, which is kind of like that alternative evaluation in the McKinsey model, kind of like that approach. And that's where, prior to going to the store or prior to going to the place where you complete the sale, you're working to try and find information about the product or the product category. And a big chunk of that, not all of that, but a big chunk of that occurs online. And they're calling that the zero moment of truth. And here are the types of sources and activities for search and discovery that consumers use. And to give you an idea, the stimulus, very similar to what we saw in McKinsey. Some of the things you see up there are magazine ads, newspaper ads, got an email from the company, saw something on TV. Marketer-driven types of communication that can help people understand the problem. And then in the first moment of truth, which remember is the purchase, I looked at the product in the store, I read brochures about it, I talked to someone in the store, and they helped me make that decision. So everything in the middle there, that ZMOT, are the sources that they're calling the zero moment of truth. And remember, that's all the search process, the information gathering that consumers do before they make that initial commitment or purchase. Talk with friends and family about a product. There are 8 of these. Now that could be, my guess is if you're looking at someone under 25 and you say, did you talk to somebody about this? They're going to translate that as saying, did you text somebody about this? And that's going to be electronic too. But that's the only one of those 8 that isn't completely electronic. All the others are. I used a search engine. Went to a website. I went to reviews. I went to the retailer site. I went to the manufacturer site and gathered information that way. So that's a really big chunk of the information that people are now looking for is done at that zero moment of truth, and it's done with electronic resources. This gives you some idea of the number of sources of information that people will use based on the product categories. You see an average of 5.8, but it's up to 18.2 sources for an automobile. I mean, can you think of 18 places you'd go to look for stuff about an automobile? It gets mind-boggling. But then if you start to say, well, I talked with people about Facebook on it, or somebody tweeted about this particular product, or there was this other campaign that went on, or I happened to see that Chevy has their ad on a NASCAR that won the race last week, and some of it I did with my mobile, some I did with my computer. Then it starts to add up. And the 18 starts to make sense. Okay? And you can see that it's a very rich information sort of environment. In addition to that, and this is really striking, the number of sources that they found doubled between 2010 and 2011. That's an incredible finding. Almost to the point of being suspect, that people would look at twice as many in one year as the other. But think about all the things that have come online in the last 5 years where you can look for sources of information that you couldn't before. There are way more places to find reviews. You can find all kinds of stuff in different sources using your mobile phone while you're out running around. There are all kinds of sites which compare shopping sites. So you no longer have to go to different retailers to determine what their prices are for a product that you've picked out. You go to a comparative shopping site and do it there. You can compare services with all kinds of different resources that provide you those sorts of reviews. So the number of available sources has gone up considerably, and that's reflected in the number that people use. In addition to that, across product categories. Now, on this graph, this blue set of values in the middle is the use of information sources in that zero moment of truth category, those online, electronic search resources that people are using to find out information about products and learn about what they're trying to buy. And across categories, they are very important parts of the decision-making process. In some cases, they are outweighed. These are health and beauty products, grocery products, restaurant products. In some cases, they're outweighed by factors that come into play at the moment of purchase. But in a lot of cases, they represent the dominant source of information that's used about that product or that service. So it's very important to be active in that zero moment of truth set of sources, and that's something, because of the breadth of it, that you need to do with a variety of different positions on the web rather than a single website that you hope people are going to come to find out about the products and services that you're offering. So that's the argument for an expanded web presence. In addition to that, part of what the number that we just saw, the increase in growth from one year to the next of the number of sources that people are looking for, is the phenomenal growth of social and mobile sources in information search. So in the 2010 study, 19% of respondents said they used online social in evaluating products and services. 16% said mobile. Both of those numbers doubled, 34% to 37% for online social, 34%, 1 in 3 for mobile. So that explains a little bit of the growth in the sources that people are looking at, and it gives you some idea of the rapidity and the breadth of the styles of search that people are employing. And when people look to the internet, this table tells us what they're trying to do. When they start to look for information about a product or a service online, what are the types of things they're looking for? Location, where are you? How do you get there? We'll talk about ways of integrating that information into a website using Google resources. In-store information. I think it's Best Buy now has an application where if you run the barcode on a product that you're interested in and you show them a better price anywhere, their salespeople are empowered within ranges to match those prices on the spot, because the assumption is that you're doing that you're looking mobile for best prices while you're in the store. They will go to a manufacturer's website, or they'll go to a retailer's website looking for a discount, looking for a deal. Is there something going on here? And that can be done, that can be communicated with your website or with a social media resource or with a Google Places page that you would add to your web presence. So these are some of the types of things. You see sharing and mobile, social and mobile are at the bottom end of this now. The slide we just saw would indicate that that's going to change. And finally, that decision varies by product. Now this is a very information-rich graph, so let's just take a second and figure out what it's trying to show us. What this shows is the number of people who use a resource, when they use it, excuse me, and how important it is to them. So as we move across horizontally, we're moving through time. We start a year ago at the far end, up to the day of purchase on the far right. These 4 classifications on the right are within a week. So these are things people are doing within the last week before a purchase. The 3 on the left are 2 to 3 months before. The 3 in the middle are essentially 1 week to 4 weeks before the purchase. Okay, so it isn't a straight direct scale, but it does give you some idea about when those searches and when that information is sought. On the vertical axis, it's the degree of influence. So in this case, we're looking at people who used a search engine. And the higher the value on the vertical scale, the more importance they gave to the results of that search, the more influential the information they acquired from it was in the search process. And then the intensity, the heat map, goes from blue, the fewest people, to red, the most people. So this orange area here represents a group of people that were high in number because of the color, that viewed the information relatively credibly, between 6 and 8, and did their information search about a week before they made the purchase. Does that make sense? Right. So let's look at what they've done with this. This represents the decision process for an automobile, an automotive product. And they have created heat maps for 5 different sources of information. Online up here, talked with family and friends, saw ads on TV, looked at automobile dealerships, saw an ad in a newspaper. Okay? So what this would indicate to us is that the purchase process for an automobile starts 6 months to a year out. That search engines are used very frequently to gather information at that point, and they're very influential, as are family and friends. At that point, there is some importance attached to advertisements on television. Now, these are the ones that might move you from that. Remember, we talked about 3.8 cars when you start out, and we added a couple of cars to our information set, or our considered set of brands as we move through it. That's where those are coming from. And then even looked at automobiles at the dealership. Now, to me, that's a little surprising. To me, I would anticipate that when you get to the point, if you're going to look at a car, you're driving a car, you're getting pretty close. And what this is saying, that for an awful lot of people, that test drive is taking place 6, 7 months ahead of time, and people are considering and kind of chewing on that information for a considerable amount of time before they go back and make that purchase. It isn't surprising that it takes a little bit longer to decide what kind of car to buy and to buy a car, especially in 2010, 2011, when it's, economy's not in all that great a shape. But it is surprising that so much of that takes place 6 months to a year out and still has such an impact on that purchase. This makes it hard to sell newspaper ads. I mean, there's almost nothing there in terms of that response. But look how that changes when we move to restaurants. Well, that's hardly surprising. Has anyone done a search for a restaurant that you might go in 6 months or a year? But typically that doesn't happen. But look at what the sources of information are. Talk with family and friends, get recommendations. Heard you guys talking about that this morning. Where we're going to go for lunch? Where do we go for dinner? What was good in town? And read a menu. Now notice that the search engines don't really show up well here. Ads on television and newspaper don't show up well here. But this is also a field in which that social mobile growth that we talked about, I would bet you that there isn't going to be another time that doesn't happen. Do you look for restaurants with your phone when you're in a new place? Yelp or TripAdvisor or something like that? That's a type of thing. I have a friend who does that. You'll hear from him later in the series. In fact, you'd hear from him today if his shoulder wasn't bothering him. And we were at a conference in Memphis, and that's what he did. We walked down the street, and he would say, well, this looks like a good restaurant, but it seems like they're having a bad night. The service is pretty slow tonight. He's reading reviews that are being written right then. And so we finally found it, and he did. He picked us out a nice place. They were having a good night. They had a nice special, and the wait staff was nice. So he was able to pick that up right away. That occurred within the hour before the purchase. Unlikely that's going to show up later on in this particular set of data as well. So here's what it's like for travel. An awful lot of information gathered relatively early on, not surprising, big chunk of that online. Importance of friends and family, where did you go, what did you do? Relatively little impact of TV, almost none in newspapers, almost none at the travel office. So if the travel office is going to influence customers and give them the information they need when they did it, where's it going to be? Well, it's going to be stuff that's available from their website, and it's going to be stuff that people look at earlier in that process. And let's look at one more. This one is fascinating. This is how people decide who to vote for. First of all, at first blush, it looks like some of the online stuff isn't that important. Look what is. Uniformly important with high important scores and high numbers of people, talked with family and friends, and did so about 2 to 6, 8 months before the election. Okay? And look at what happens with advertising. That's kind of a bipolar distribution between a whole lot of people who saw it, who were exposed to it, and about half of them saying it made no difference at all, it made a lot of difference, and half of them saying it made no difference at all. And if you assume a campaign that's roughly equally weighted, and you assume that people are drawn to messages that they like, and you assume that the electorate is fairly polarized, all of which seem to be fairly safe assumptions in our current environment, then that starts to make some sense. The stuff my guy put out was great. I loved it. Stuff the other guy put out was a bunch of trash. Okay? And that's true whether I saw it on TV or in newspapers. But the other thing that you see is what those advertisements are really trying to do is not hope that you're going to see a bad ad about somebody and then not vote for them for that reason. They want you to figure out, they want you to take the message of that ad and go talk about it with your friends and family and figure out who you're going to vote for there. So all this stuff isn't really so much to convince as it is to drive that conversation, to frame the message as they're saying, to drive the narrative about you and about your opponent. And so these results are consistent with the types of things you hear coming out of political strategists and political campaigns. So that's the consumer journey. And you can see that if we're going to take part in that, a couple things have to happen. First of all, we've got to be in a lot of different places. We've got to have our content in a variety of locations and resources on the web. And if possible, would like to have an integrated message. Second, it's not going to be as obvious what the impact of that exposure is going to be. If people are looking at my dealership, my car dealership, 6 to 8 months in advance of when they buy their car, and what I'm trying to do is look at the number of people who come to my site, who buy within 24 hours, who show up on the lot within 24 hours, that metric isn't going to work. You know, it's just too far off. So I've got to figure out for my product and service, what is the consumer decision journey like? And so when I start to evaluate the metrics for web communication or other types of communication from my promotional efforts, then I've got to take that into account. And I have to be looking at who came to us 8 months ago that maybe we saw again as they started to move toward the decision process. So I extend the time frame of my evaluation. And I focus on those time frames, if I can identify them in the consumer journey, that are most important and most significant. Okay, so what does the web presence look like, a comprehensive web presence? Well, the heart of it is going to be the website of the organization and the basic content that it wants to present there. The reason for that is that's the stuff that you have almost complete control over. I say almost complete because it is possible to set up websites to allow people to comment on what they've seen, what they've done. If it's your website, you have a great deal of leeway in terms of what you leave up and what you take down. But to the extent that you allow people to have that freedom on your site and share that with others, there's at least some potential for consumer-generated content to show up on that site. So you have a chance to, in the organizational website, to frame the content of your organization and present it in a way that you think is relevant to consumers and important to you and to your objectives. And you have a chance to do that through the resources that we're going to be working with, using some resources that are already in use internally in the organizations, within your organization. So you might have content that currently exists across the organization that you simply use your website to share and make available in a different way. And so once you update that content, it's going to show up in a different way on the website. So you have a chance to leverage some of those kinds of resources as well as get a common unified message about what you want to do that you control. We're going to look at multimedia and mapping content and the integration of those as part of that process. Now there are a couple of things going on here. As we'll see when we look a little bit more depth at social media, some of the multimedia sites are also social media sites. There's the opportunity for creating communities. There's the opportunity to build collections of resources that people come back to. Opportunities to subscribe, opportunities to follow, opportunities to comment, opportunities to share. So they can stand on their own. So it's possible that your multimedia site, and for you guys, I think maybe the best alternative might be there might be a YouTube channel, which you already have, as a way of accumulating resources that brings people together and is a direct outreach of what you're trying to accomplish. But also, it provides content that can come back into the site. So if you create a series of images in Picasa, for example, which is a Google product, you can reflect those very easily in your website individually or as a slideshow. You can move those over to Facebook relatively easy or incorporate them into your blog relatively easy. So it becomes a set of resources. Same thing is true with YouTube. As you create video resources that you're going to use in the organization, those can be shared across the various components of the website presence as well. Social media content and integration, and this would include some of the the largest social media sites like Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. And here, it's kind of a two-way street. You have some of these resources that you would like for people, if they see you, if they run into you there. If you're trying to interact with people on Facebook, you'd like to at least give them the opportunity to come see you, to come see your site, and let them know where you are active on other sorts of things. If they like what you say on Facebook, they might be interested in seeing what you have to say on your blog, so you make that kind of opportunity available to them. You also give, in your website, users the opportunity to share what they found on your site with their Facebook account. And when in the multimedia, the social media space, some of what you're trying to do is turn organizational content into consumer content. Because as soon as that gets posted by a user to your site, they think, here's something really good, you need to see it, and they do that on Twitter, or they cite your work in a blog, or they see something they like and share that on Facebook, then all of a sudden that's their seal of approval. And now we move in the consumer journey, remember, from the far left, where we're doing online search, we now incorporate that middle block as well, where people are talking with friends and family, and they're saying positive things about what you have up. Locational services, content and integration. This would be things like Google Places, Yelp, Foursquare, Gowalla, and these are some of the services that would allow you to expand your presence more to mobile devices, because a lot of them are used for that. A lot of these searches and a lot of the services are designed specifically for people to use from mobile devices to gather information and to make decisions kind of on the run. They all have social media components, so that if you go to a Yelp or Foursquare listing and you like what you've seen, you might want to, a user now, you would want to share that back. So this gives you a chance to get into those growing areas of search and information gathering of social and mobile. And then advertising services and system metrics. Now the services we're talking about here are things like Google AdWords and Facebook ads. And you can now do advertising on YouTube as well. And you really have two types of opportunities here. One of them is to place ads on content in that system. So to place an ad that shows up on a Google search for just terms that are related to your business, or on Facebook pages to searches that are related to what you're trying to do, or to host ads, which means that you allow advertising on your site. So that people can find out about other things, and that becomes a source of revenue, because if someone clicks on an ad on your YouTube video or on your web page, then you get a little percentage of the ad revenue that Google gets from that. As you can tell from their income statement, they keep most of it for themselves, but you do in fact get a little cut of that if you want to do it. Now that's a decision to make. Every click takes people away from your site, takes people away from your content. It might not be worth it, but at least gives you that opportunity. And then all of that stuff has metrics associated with it that are provided at relatively little, and in most cases no cost, by many of those resources. Now the ones that are most relevant, that we'll talk a little bit more about later, are Google Analytics, which would cover your website. Facebook has analytics capabilities as well. YouTube has analytic capabilities built in that they just give you. If you decide to use the hosting services, if you decide to host ads, then AdSense has metrics that it provides to let you know who saw your ads, who saw you, they showed, and how many times they clicked. That's built in automatically to the Google Places system. And then Google AdWords has a very, for a free service, a very sophisticated system that lets you know how people are interacting on your site. They've even, I think, for their premium service, enacted a program that they call attribution testing, in which you're able to identify, to set up a consumer journey for your product. And how important are the ads at each of those phases? You determine that, you set that weight, and then you evaluate your ad performance based on that, and the performance of your site based on that model that you've established.